Hi, ladies. Today we are moving away from our regular content to get a little bit more vulnerable.
We wanted to share with you our own personal journeys of how we got to the place of being ready to ask for help. This has been a big deal for both of us.
Yeah.
We consider ourselves pretty independent women, I think,
Yes.
but this was a pivotal change for both of us in our life's journey and our story and being able to better help others and being able to finally better start to take care of ourselves again. And we want to share that with you so that you really understand where we're coming from when we talk about it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. I, well, thank you for doing this show with me today because I know this isn't easy as practitioners. We really like to stay with, well, I shouldn't say we. I like to stay with my practitioner hat on and not allow myself to go into my emotions because the experience is painful. Um, and Christina has her own unique journey into motherhood that I wanted to interview her a little bit about to begin with, because I know that it's something that so many of you are dealing with or have dealt with or will deal with, which is Christina had the experience of actually losing her mother while becoming a mother. And can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and how you had the courage, being raised by a math teacher and an engineer, very linear thinkers, to need to reach out and ask for help in that process?
I will tell you, it took me a long time to get there. My mom battled a terrible condition that ended up taking her life. Too hard to explain. That's not the point. Um, the point was, in the last few years of her life, I was transitioning into becoming a mom. I got pregnant. I had my first child. She was still with us at that time, but not at all able to be involved in that child's life the way she had envisioned, the way I had envisioned. My mom, I describe her as the real life Maria from The Sound of Music. We literally were singing in harmony in my house doing the dishes. I know, blissfully happy childhood. It was amazing, but I was not at all prepared for the experience of losing her as I was becoming a mom. That's not at all how I pictured it would go. And it took me a long time, the help of people who love me, including Jen, and a therapist who I actually have the honor of treating as a client as well, who slowly but surely, over several years and several kind and gentle mentions of, I think you could benefit from some professional help. I really think that getting some therapy would allow you to get through this intact. And I fought it. I didn't realize I was fighting it, but I thought, like Jen said, I can handle this. I had a happy childhood. I'm fine. I can get through this. It's going to be all right. And then once you have a child too, your whole world is kind of
Yeah.
spinning because, and then we bought a house at the same time, and then the house was falling apart, and then things were getting worse with mom, and then your marriage is strained because of all the other things going on. My daughter had respiratory problems. She was sick, and I didn't even see the path of how to ask for help, or how was that even going to help? Therapy, like,
Who
I
has
had,
time for that?
who has time for that? And then what is that going to do about the house that's falling apart? It's not going
Yeah.
to heal my mom. It's not going to fix anything, is how I thought. Finally, she got put on hospice, and I was at my breaking point. I knew I was not going to be able to be present with her in those last moments of her life the way I needed to be. And I finally went to therapy, and I said I had this amazing, incredible experience with EMDR. I now, it saved those last moments with my mother. If I wouldn't have had that, I would not, I don't know if I'd be here. I don't know if I'd be able to sit here and talk to you about this. I now have the honor of being able to refer the mothers that I treat for this therapy when it's appropriate for them, because I see women struggling with that transition to becoming a mom, especially in cases of parent loss at the same time. And I now know when to make that referral. I would not be able to be present for those women in that way if I hadn't walked that path myself. And in that way, it has turned into, as you say, make your mess your message. Isn't that the
Yes.
the phrase?
I so appreciate you allowing yourself to be vulnerable and in the moment. I wonder if I could dig a little bit deeper, because we are nerdy and science brained. And what was the conversation that you had with yourself to allow yourself to ask and receive help?
Honestly, it was a white flag sort of feeling. It was, I
You've tried all that
I
you knew
had
to do.
tried everything I could think of, and it was it was go time. If you're going to lose your parent and you know you're going to lose your parent and you can't be there for them in that moment and for yourself at the end of their life, you can't get that back ever. That is last call. And that's what finally compelled me to ask for and receive the help that those who cared about me had been trying to guide me to receive for years already.
Yeah, and it was heartbreaking and at the same time amazing to be on this side watching that, knowing that you would benefit tremendously from that particular type of therapy. And yeah, it's been an honor to walk beside Christina through this process because she has taught me a lot about allowing yourself to feel your feelings and how much stronger that actually can make you.
Yes, Jenn is a fighter. And she is always seeking knowledge and information, and that's what makes her so good at what she does as a coach. Incredibly good at what she does, but I know that that necessarily wasn't the most natural thing for her to learn to slow down and allow herself to feel her feelings
Yeah.
and to cry. And that is also a part of asking for and receiving help. It's that journey of learning to be okay with sitting in our feelings. And that wasn't my struggle. But as you can see, my struggle was still to ask for and receive help at the
Yeah.
time I needed it most, even though I don't have the personality type that fights feeling the feelings.
Well, and it's overwhelm. It's sheer overwhelm, which I know every single mom can
Yep.
relate to because when you get in this state, there isn't enough time, there isn't enough energy, there aren't enough resources, it feels like, to just be able to do the basic things that need to be done.
Yes, I that was so well said. I had never imagined feeling. I didn't think parenting was going to be easy. Okay, I'm not that naive, but I never pictured feeling as strained and as depleted
Yeah.
as I did. And that is part of what makes it hard to ask for help, to know when is that white flag moment. You get to
Yeah.
decide, you
And
know?
it is different for every single woman because our thresholds are all different. But eventually, we all have that rock bottom moment. And I know for me, it was 17 years ago. Actually, I don't know if it was 17 years ago. The start of it was 17 years ago, but I've kind of hit the bottom and come back up multiple times since then.
And I know your first child just had that 17th birthday.
He did.
I'm guessing, does that bring you back to sort of reliving again the birth trauma that you sustained that has actually brought you to where you are now professionally?
Yeah, it's interesting. Christina and I preparing for this show today, part of doing this was as we were digging into the research about vaginal births and recognizing the moment where my life really changed 17 years ago, 26 years old, naive, very trusting of my doctor, my birth plan. Didn't have any complications in my pregnancy, had a very normal pregnancy. Um, and then things went very wrong in that delivery room. And, you know, I think even now, the consequences of that have finally caught up to me in terms of just the amount of grief and loss that I felt over the past 17 years in so many different ways.
So you've told me before, when you went to have that first baby, you're 26, you painted that picture so beautifully, so trusting and ready to receive the help that you needed at that time, which was to help give birth to your first child. And you've told me before you went in with a birth plan. And
Yes,
how did you feel? Did you feel confident? Did you
I
feel,
did.
yeah,
I did receive an episiotomy. That was by choice. I knew that I wanted to be
you mean
comfortable.
epidural?
I mean, epidural.
It's all this talk about emotions.
It's
Causing
like
confusion.
Yeah.
So the
So I
epidural.
had the epidural. I really am with it on this topic. Um, I was fine with that. Comfortable with the epidural. Was in labor. Excuse me. Was in labor for 20 hours or so, and then pushed for 3+ hours, and that's really where the problem started, because with that epidural uh, and the purple pushing,
which we talked about last week.
I fatigued in that process.
And that's about as long, I think, as anybody could go. And so at that point, we already know, like we talked about last week, just that number of hours of pushing puts you at risk for prolapse later.
Yeah.
But then what happened at that threshold? You'd been pushing for all those hours. And what was that next step?
Yeah, Chase was stuck in the birth canal, and I was aware of that because there was a sense of urgency that they needed to get him out. And so my OB began using forceps. Actually, at first, she tried the vacuum. And knowing what I know now, those instruments weren't used effectively, we'll say, because I was so fatigued that at that point, the nurse was actually pushing down on my belly as they were trying to get me to push to really get him to come out. But I was so exhausted at that point that I don't think that I was doing a really effective job of pushing. So it was really just a lot of yanking, essentially a lot of pushing up here. I was bruised. I had visible bruises all over my rib cage. After delivery from, they were just trying to get him out.
They were probably panicking, I think, at
Yes.
that point. And so the vacuum was used throughout that phase. And then they also had to bring in another instrument.
They eventually got him out with the forceps.
And the vacuum and forceps are tools that I know are needed sometimes. That being said, we want you to know that having those tools used in your birth, it's important to know that, because that is another risk factor for prolapse. Our whole mission is to empower you with information and knowledge. We are not trying to scare anyone, but it is important that you know what happened at your birth and how that will likely potentially affect you down the road. You may not feel the effects right away, but you need to know what happened. I think sometimes the vacuum and forceps can be used without severe injury, but I know, like Jenn said, they're used whether or not she had the strength to be effectively pushing at that time. So that does creates a vacuum.
Yes.
And a lot of downward pulling force, because if she's not pushing, it's just suctioning on her internal organs. And that is much like we educate women about the use of menstrual cups, Diva cup. And they've asked us before, I've heard horror stories that can cause or worsen prolapse. And the truth is that only causes or worsens prolapse if you don't break the seal before you pull it out. And that is like what happened to Jenn, only on steroids during her birth process. And then using the forceps in a panic to save her and the baby. And the 11th hour, the 20-something hour of labor is surely what ended up causing
a lot
some
of
the
damage.
most severe injuries.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, very quickly postpartum, I was completely incontinent both ways, which let me know that that wasn't normal. But there again, I was in my bedroom, holed up, nursing a newborn. And basically, every single time I needed to use the restroom was having an accident. I was taking multiple showers a day. I wouldn't come out of my room. My husband was like, I don't know what is wrong. What is going on here?
And you officially had what degree of?
I had a 4th-degree tear. Yeah.
Which means hole to hole, basically.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly. And were you in a lot of pain at the time, in addition to losing control of bowel and bladder and then immediate postnatal?
I was definitely in a lot of local pain. So one of my best friends who happened to be at the birth of my son actually came over that next week to visit. And she is an OBGYN nurse, thank goodness. And she examined me and quickly realized that I had gotten an infection. So
Oh
I
my
needed to
goodness.
go back in and get that taken care of. Because that was a source of a lot of the local pain that I was having. Um, but yeah, it was just a hot mess. And then I got pregnant 6 months later, like the first time I had sex after. How cruel.
That is really cruel. And I'm sure it wasn't pleasurable after all the details of that story there. But I know you've also talked about the emotional journey of what all of those issues did to your ability to be a mom.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it was not quite how you pictured it. Your ability to
No.
interact with your baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a death of sorts of who I was. And, I continue to recognize just how deeply that impacted me because I am that person. You can cry over the spilled milk or you can clean it up and move forward the best that you can. And so I'm pretty good at just shoving it down and just moving forward. So it was like, well, other people have it worse, right? I didn't lose my son, which I'm so grateful for because he was born APGAR 0, and that was a real possibility that could have happened. So I didn't lose my son. I didn't lose my own life. And this was just what I had to deal with. So I just kept shoving it down, shoving it down, shoving it down. And it finally caught up with me after my third pregnancy 7 years ago, where the prolapse really went into overdrive. The prolapse in the DR.
What would you say? What were the intervals? What did the intervals look like for you? At which point you realized you had to ask for help in this journey?
Hmm, that's a tough one. Um, I knew that something was very wrong after I had Chase. And I was grateful that I had my friend who was an OBGYN nurse that could come and examine me. I don't know how long it would have taken me to go back to the OB and get examined had she not really pushed me to do that and said, hey, there's a problem here. You really need to do that.
I do
Um,
know that your story about asking for help regarding the prolapse after your third is
yes.
sadly well represented amongst all the women that we work with.
Yeah, I did. I recognized pretty quickly after having Cooper, I was feeling a lot of downward pressure the same way that I felt in the third trimester of my pregnancy right before delivery. So I had the courage when I went to the restroom. I did look down there and I saw that something was protruding out of my vagina. And I always say it was like my Georgia O'Keeffe looked like a Picasso. If you're familiar with art, you'll understand that. Um, so it was a moment of panic, and I called my OB's office. Was able to get in pretty quickly. I think it was the next day actually that I was able to get in. And she examined me laying on my back and proceeded to tell me that this wasn't that bad. I went in knowing, because I was educated at that point, that I needed a referral to a urogynecologist to actually get the prolapse diagnosis. Um, and she didn't want to give it to me. And she was like, well, my rectocele is worse than this. This is kind of just what happens after you have a baby kind of thing.
This is
Yeah.
heartbreaking. And these are the messages that we receive from you every day. We receive messages from women saying, I felt panicky. I felt desperate. I knew something wasn't right with my body. If you know something's not right with your body, you are right. And you deserve to be
Yes.
heard. You deserve to be referred for the proper care. You deserve resources to help you feel better and get that control of your own body back. And all too often, we hear this story from women. They went into their doctor, they were willing to be vulnerable enough to say, I need help. Something is not right. And they are brushed aside, dismissed, shamed, made to feel less than, and made to feel like something's in their head.
Yes.
And that's never the case. If you know something's wrong, please do know it's okay to keep looking. There is a place to find help, and we are honored to be that place for so many women.
And whether you get a diagnosis or not, it doesn't matter. There's still things that you can do to feel better in your body, to restore your dignity. Because I think that was the biggest thing that I felt robbed from me was my dignity, my self-confidence. You know, I didn't become an exercise physiologist because I hated working out. You know, like I loved swinging me some kettlebells, right? But I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that I loved in both my work, in hobbies, as well as parenting my children. And, you know, we don't want that for any of you. And that is why we created the program.
And
And
your story doesn't have to be as dramatic or as full of trauma as Jenn's to warrant help. I didn't have the dramatic birth story that Jenn has. I didn't have severe injuries, and I still needed skilled care to close my diastasis recti, the gap in your abdominals, to restore my core strength such that I wouldn't have back and hip discomfort every time I bent down to play with my child or soothe her in the crib. I still needed that help without any of that birth trauma. So know that your
yeah,
story doesn't have to sound that bad
right.
to need help on the other end, to feel like you again, to be able to be the mom that you wanted to be able to be the friend and the partner and the spouse that you wanted to be. If your sex life with your husband is impacted, your partner, that is a dramatic issue and there is help. All those things matter, and you are worth having them addressed and getting them fixed and getting the help you definitely deserve.
Yeah, because it's not too late. I'm sitting here 17 years later. And like I told Christina the other day, I continue to heal and get stronger. So even if you are on this end of the spectrum, is it going to happen for you in 30 days, 10 minutes a day? No, it's going to take, you're going to start to feel better in 30 days, but it's going to be that consistent effort, 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, over 6 months, over a year. You know, for me, it's 4 years of implementing our program 5 days a week because that's when I feel my best. And, you know, sex continues to get better. I'm able to do more impact activities than I ever thought possible.
Without leakage and
Without,
without increased pressure or discomfort.
yes, or urgency. Like, oh, I'm starting to do jumping jacks, and maybe you don't pee yourself, but you feel like, ooh, I'm going to need to go run to the restroom now.
Yep. And so the course of the journey may look different for each of you, but healing and recovery is possible, whether you're early postpartum. We just received a testimonial from a woman who said her first was born 37 years ago and she is elated with the results she's been getting. So the spectrum is wide of when it's possible to get better and to feel better and to reclaim you again. And it is possible.
And it's never too late to ask for help. If you've been battling this on your own, if you've tried multiple programs, we have lots of women that come in to us that have tried other things and have felt hopeless because it didn't work for them. We have a 30-day money back guarantee because we are confident, because we did the research. We sacrificed 3 years of our life to do the
For a
research.
worthy cause.
Yes, because we wanted to prove that this was possible, that it was possible to change and reverse, I'm going to just say it, reverse prolapse without inserting anything.
Without Kegels.
And without Kegels.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's crazy revolutionary, but it works.
Yep. We didn't even foresee having this business
No.
several years ago when we started the research, but we realized as we were getting the door shut on us, as we approached physicians with our super exciting new program that was changing women's lives, and they were not interested. It was too outside the box. It didn't align with what they saw as the right path and the standard path. And we were getting the door shut on us. And we realized the way to get this to the women who need it is to go straight to the women themselves. And that is why we are here on this mission, to get this help into the hands of those who could use it the most.
Yeah, we don't want you to struggle in the same way that we have. And, you know, as girlfriends, when you find something that works for you, you want to share it.
Yep. And that's exactly why we're here. Please hop over to our website, tightenyourtinkler.com, and take the 5-minute quiz, which will help you connect the dots between a lot of issues you may be dealing with. And you're wondering, is that me? I don't know. It shows you how many of them are actually all connected and can all be fixed all at once.
Yeah, all of the issues are listed on the website as well. So if you'd love to connect, if you have questions, we'd love to field them. You can private message us on our Instagram account, titan.your.tinkler, or you can find us over on Facebook.